What I found most surprising was, in fact, the role of government and of public capital in enabling private capital to come in and be effective within an impact investing strategy. I think in the conversations that you hear, many times it's about the private markets working and being the solution, and what we need is more private capital. And in fact, what we found is that in many of the best examples, it's private capital finding out the most effective way to leverage public capital, public resources, public policy in order to make markets work for the bottom of the pyramid, for people who have not been engaged previously. And I think that for me, that was the biggest kind of surprise, because I don't think of myself as somebody who's looks to government for many solutions, and to find out the number of times government actors really were critical partners in setting the table, not necessarily executing the strategy, but simply putting the places in place in order for success to happen by private sector investors and business people who were mission motivated and driven to have profit with purpose, was something I really wasn't ready for.
I was surprised as we explored multilingual leadership that it seemed that there is an established community out there of academics, of researchers, of organization executives who get this, and cross-sector partnership, tri-sector athletes. I mean, there's a number of ways of saying it, but that it was most prevalent in the non-profit sector, where I think for many years now, particularly through the recession, when those organizations suffered tremendously and had a huge financial pressure on the nonprofit sector, where I think they realized that to be successful and sustainable, that was the only way of operating. You have to focus on collective impact if you want to succeed now in the nonprofit world. So I think it felt to me like the nonprofit world was ahead of the curve a little bit there. I think the public sector was catching up. I think austerity has forced them to do that, to look for different innovative ways of providing services. So I think really it's now, it's up to business and finance to come to the table.
I think what's interesting about that, though, is when we actually spoke to the fund managers, none of them talked about collaborative anything, right? They didn't say, I'm taking the stuff from the nonprofit sector and I'm bringing it into my investor group, right? Not at all, right? So what you see is they're each kind of tailoring their message very naturally to the person that they're talking to, and kind of doing that deftly and without anybody really noticing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely still an aura, despite the reality of what we've got in the funds, there's still an aura that this has to look, smell, and feel like finance for people to take it seriously in many of the market rate type of investments. When you're talking and trying to get an LP to give you money, you better talk finance and you better talk return. You have to build in your mission story in a way that is kosher for them.
Right.
But it's not as if, like, all of a sudden, you're really going to say, we're going to start this fund and we're going to wait till the government down the street, lets us. That's not going to fly. It's much more savvy and tricky than that.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's what's powerful about the book, is we get at the minutiae of that and the nuance of that, which is really delicate. The way that someone focused on delivering a financial rate of return.
And very few other people in their network actually hear the whole story, right? We heard it because we talked to everybody, but they're sitting there saying, not inconsistently, but saying the messages that people need to hear for them to move forward.
Right, that's right. And I think Jed's point about the role of government is an important one, but it's not big government stepping in. It's not clumsy. It's not people sitting around a table, an all-day meeting working through finite details. It's not a clunky 2-year RFP process. Like, this is cutting-edge innovation where there's smart policymakers who see the role for themselves and then back off and get out to let the people do what they need to do.
And the same can be said of impact assessment, right? Which is this big kind of albatross for the field of impact investing. Is how do you actually know whether you've had the impact you've had? And it's kind of messy. And there's people trying to create standards, and there's people kind of saying, no, I need to do it my way to please my stakeholders, and all of that is actually part of an evolving marketplace. But for the investor, they have decisions to make about how much you're going to spend, who are you going to engage, what are you going to promise people, and what we see is kind of having enough of the nonprofit skill set allows you to take those things and translate them